Hey, I'm Grant, and welcome to the channel for September 10th. So I guess I want to talk a little about this week. So the Digression Bar podcast number 26 was coming out a little bit late. It should be out by now, just because Labor Day kind of threw a wrench in the works. And then I wasn't able to even film it until Thursday, so basically 24 hours before it was supposed to come out. And basically, that generates a lot of footage, even though it was just Ellie and I. That's 3 camera feeds, and it's all, I'd say, about an hour long. And so to convert those to be usable or like proper, that alone took a couple more hours. So it's like, got home at 4, say start recording at 4:30, so then it's 5:30, get them in, start processing. Honestly, I don't think they were done until 11:30. And there's obviously there's a lot of leeway in there, I have to eat and stuff, but it wasn't realistic to get it out. But I've been looking at a couple things, because I think this brought up a really good point, is I've been thinking about investing some time in just improving my workflow more, especially around the podcast. And this is something that kind of came out of me going down to that public access station. Stuff like I convert my files twice, and that's a real pain, especially for the podcast. Podcast isn't any worse than, say, this. It's just the fact that it's longer means it takes longer, and that makes it the biggest offender. But I convert them twice, and I really don't think I need to, because ultimately I should be able to do it just once. And then I also technically I don't know exactly what the fix would be, because I get a couple extra perks by doing it 2 times. One time gives me the proper format I need, or codec or whatever. I'm not sure I really understand it. And the second one, what it also does is it generates what's called proxy files. Basically, it's a super compressed version of the file to edit with, so that it's quick to load and easy to move around. And then you apply the actual cuts when you export to the real thing. So I'm thinking about putting some time in and trying a couple ideas to cut that down. So one being is I want to really sit down and figure out and say, this is what I work at. I work at this frame rate. I work in this codec, and I do it all properly. That's a weird thing I want to throw out, is I want to do it properly. I think I've built up this weird kind of infection of bad practices due to how things have gone in the past. So for example, the reason I converted twice specifically was because I had all these weird ways of getting footage, and I needed to find a way where I could take everything, regardless of where it was from, and make it work. So I look at stuff like when I played Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, still gonna edit that at some point, it changed resolutions. So I needed something I could run through a conversion that fixes that and handles that, so it could fit alongside my webcam footage. Because OBS, the stuff I use for streaming stuff, that comes out at a very specific codec and frame rate and all that. My cameras come out as a very specific thing. My phone comes out as a very specific thing, and they all have these weird little quirks to them, and I had to find a way to pull it all together. And I think now I'm getting, hopefully, to the level where I don't necessarily need to deal with that. Instead of having what I think is ultimately a band-aid, I can look at stuff where instead of having this weird process to deal with bad footage, maybe I can just fix the footage. And that's something I think I want to look into as well. So on that note, one of the main things I also want to look at is I'm thinking about getting just a nice camcorder. So the ones I use for the podcast are decent. They're used, and they're a personal camcorder. So they have served their function really well. I mean, it's clear it's a personal camcorder, and they have a lot of just quirks about them. So, for example, I have to have a very specific program by Canon to pull the files off, and that's not the most stable. Or I'm forced to use the AVC HD format, because you have to use a different program if you want to pull them off as MP4s, which would be faster and take up less file on my computer. But that program doesn't work, and they've never updated it, it seems. So I can pull it manually, but it's cut up into 15-minute chunks. So it's just this it's really annoying. So I'm thinking about sitting down and getting a really good camcorder, and then going off of something I saw when I went down to the public access is they were filming basically this debate using 2 cameras. One was their wide shot, and the other one was what they'd go between. Like they'd zoom in on this person, zoom in on this person. And it kind of got me thinking of maybe I should do something similar to that to speed up my editing. Right now, I do one shot per person and then the wide. And I just cut between people as I need to in post. But I really almost like the idea of, what sucks about doing that is I have to take 2 to 3 passes through the podcast to fix everything. So I do one for the rough cuts where I just jump around as is and see who's talking. And then I do another one because ultimately, because of how that process works, all your cuts are like a second too late, and it ends up being kind of odd, or like sometimes you just misclick and it'll be like person A, BA, or A, BB, and you just got to fix that stuff. Well, I like the idea of, if I did have one good camera, that if this is my main camera, do the podcast towards that camera and then still have side shots, but ultimately this is your main camera. And then in theory, I don't need to make that second pass if I never cut from person to person. If I always go person, wide, person, then the cuts are genuinely seamless. You can follow the conversation, and I only need to go in when someone's like telling like a story or something like where they're talking a lot. And that alone would save me so much time. Or even like if I still have to do it, the idea that I don't have to do it that much, I can obviously go to where, like if I'm only making 10 cuts over an hour, where I do something crazy, I only need to check 10 cuts. Whereas I know with like 3 people, where there's a really dynamic conversation, like when I don't have a wide, for example, because whatever reason it happened, there are so many cuts. And I need to spend like 30 seconds on each one, it seems like sometimes. So that's one thing I would really want to get it down. As well as I'm hoping, if I get a good camera, I can deal with some of this stuff. So like I can have it export in the proper format, things like that. I'm also looking into how I record the audio, how I set up the podcast. Like for example, as part of this, if I am going to do my wide shot, I need to basically restructure my apartment a little bit so we can do it, because right now, like one of the biggest issues with the wide shot is it's just hard to get it where it can see everyone without showing the cameras, stuff like that, or the lights. And I'll probably change it. Like right now we just do it on the couch. I was thinking of maybe doing something a little bit different, or maybe just like a slightly different area of my apartment, something to hopefully give a better idea and a better filming experience. It's something that's still up in the air, and like we'll have to see. It's a whole thing. I'm just gonna try a bunch of stuff. I also want to use that camera hopefully as a way to force myself to experiment and learn about a lot of different aspects of recording stuff. So things like exposure. I'm hoping if I have like more of a professional grade camera where not everything's auto, I'm kind of forced to learn more about it because I need to. Or things like, okay, when I sit down and let me use like a specific frame rate, and I'm going to make sure everything comes in at that frame rate instead of just taking everything as is off the camera, like trying to really understand all of that. I want to also experiment with like how I record audio. This is something that it'll be interesting because, like for example, right now I usually use the wide shots audio to edit with, and then I just put in each individual camera's audios later. I could, in theory, eliminate that if I record it all to one track. Don't know if I want to do that exactly, because then it's hard to like take out stuff in post. But I have a couple ideas using my audio interface here to maybe record it all into one file and then put it in after, and then just try a couple things with that. And then I really want to experiment with like just automation. It's something I see a lot for my job and stuff, and I would love to bring in for my own stuff. It's something it's a whole project I want to work on actually. Just to say, I like the idea of me creating like just a bin on my desktop that's like incoming files. And since I already solved this issue, theoretically, at this point in time, of how to translate my files to what I need them to be, you just put them in there and it just kind of sorts them out and converts them all. So it takes away me needing to sit down there and do stuff. I want to stop removing these things that are blocking me from actually doing the editing and actually doing the creative part, like encoding and stuff. All that. I just want to get rid of that, so it's all just seamless and just goes. And these are all the things I want to tackle, and I'm hoping by removing these and dealing with these, I can have more time to do the projects I want, because it definitely feels like the podcast kind of takes up more time than I would like, but I really want it to keep being every 2 weeks. And I'd like to, again, I've talked about this a lot, I really want it to graduate to something more. And I think that would be the first step. It was really inspiring when I went down to the studio, though, to see how they could have something on such a higher level than I have, and also you just make one pass and it's done. And I don't think I'll ever get to that level by myself, but I really think that would be a great change for the podcast, where if I can get it out within the day, instead of it being this big week-long thing, that would just blow the doors wide open for doing other stuff. And that's what I really want to tackle. And then also on the cameras, because I want to do like more live action stuff. My sister Ellie's in town. I want to kind of maybe do at least one short where you just sit down. I'm hoping this Saturday or so, she comes over and we'll say like, okay, we're going to make a short. We don't know what it is yet. Let's sit down. Let's write it out right now. Film it. Post it. See where it goes from there. Like, the point isn't for it to be amazing. I don't even need it to be like funny. It's just make it. See how I like it. Can I direct it? And yeah, just go from there. There's a lot of things I want to try this week. And then somewhere in there, I'm just gotta find out where to put in all the Ruby on Rails training too. That's coming along fine. It's just like every other week it has to basically stop because of the podcast. And that becomes a huge, huge thing. But if I can get the podcast down, I think that's going to be a big major hurdle to get over. And that will help me a lot. So otherwise, I think some of that will also go into some other projects I'm hopefully doing towards the end of September, or like streaming all that. I still like that. I still like that a lot. It's hard to fit that in with the rest. But hopefully, good stuff for the channel coming up. Otherwise, you can always reach me over on Twitter. It's at taken4grantd, or my email, it's grant@taken4grantd.com, and we'll be back again next week.